There are people sitting around, their only job is to attack the symbols of the nation, to attack the companions. They are like, my dream is upon you, and my leniency is upon you. How did the sedition begin? The rebellious faction killed Amr. This text cannot be revealed until after Amr was actually killed. Did any of the Prophet's companions, may God bless him and grant him peace, participate in the killing of our master, Uthman? If it weren't for Ali, people wouldn't know how things were among the Muslims. There were motives and reasons, and there were signs of the day of the massacre. You could say that it was the first declaration of rebellion against our master, Uthman. May God be pleased with him. You feel that there is something in our history that we always try to hide. We haven't done anything with our history, nothing. No one hid anything. So why don't we discuss everything openly? In the light, if someone who doesn't have the necessary tools delves into it, they will emerge, wounded. To all the wolves, wolf, wolf, wolf. Yes, music. Well done. Peace be upon you, my brothers, wherever you are. Welcome to a new episode of the program. This is the 100 Questions in History series, through which we answer pressing questions about our vast and rich Islamic history. Where have we reached? Have we reached the fourth axis, or are we still on it? We are currently on the fourth axis, the axis of the rightly guided caliphate. In which episode are we today? Today is the 18th episode. We reached question number 36, or we stopped at it. And always, in this series, we welcome our regular guest, Professor Muhammad Al-Harni. Welcome, Professor Muhammad. May God bless you and elevate your status. Welcome. Yesterday, I called one of the sisters, and she sent her greetings first. She told me about problems at home. Of course, all the brothers and sisters call, but she called, and it was maybe 6 minutes on the phone. She couldn't express how much she admired this series, and this is truly amazing. As she was talking, I was thinking about the blessings of God Almighty. May God bless you all. Of course, I thank you. This series is a blessing from God for us and for you. The reactions, I am surprised by their number, and a warm welcome, and I ask God Almighty that this be an accepted deed with Him, the most generous. Amen. Amen. And my greetings and salutations to all my viewers. May God reward you and bless you, Professor Muhammad. Question number 36 is ready. We put our trust in God. Professor Muhammad, why do you feel that there is something we always try to hide? Do you feel that there is something in our history that we always try to conceal, or that we try, for example, to avoid talking about certain things in our religion in order to avoid several issues? And so, question number 36 tells you that our esteemed scholars tell us that we should refrain from talking about what transpired between the companions of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. My brother, there is much talk. Talk about whatever you want. Why do you want to talk about it so much? Explain it, interpret it, and get involved in its complexities. Doesn't this topic increase discord? Doesn't it increase confusion among people? So stay away from all this talk. And so, what do you feel? Here you feel that something needs to be hidden, and the question arises of why don't we discuss everything clearly, openly, in the light, so that everyone understands what happened and its consequences up to the present day. How do we respond? In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, and peace and blessings be upon the messenger of God, his family, his companions, and those who follow him. Okay, this is a good question. It means, why do we refrain from discussing what transpired between the companions? Look, sir, the short answer to this question is, why would you order a non-electrician to stop tampering with electricity? Why would you order a non-chemist to stop tampering with materials in the lab? Someone has weapons at home. Why hide them from your children and order them to stop tampering with weapons? Because they are not specialists. That's all. This is what the scholars meant when they spoke about refraining from discussing what transpired between the companions. Their words, in very simple terms, are that this is a large and complex topic that requires specialization. If someone who doesn't have the necessary qualifications tries to address it, discuss it, or delve qualified to acquire sufficient knowledge will emerge from this situation injured, like someone playing with weapons, electricity, or chemicals. The problem is that this injury will be to his faith. If he lacks sufficient scientific and spiritual preparation, he will inevitably, without fail, take sides and begin to insult the other side of the companions, or even both sides. Consequently, his faith will be lost. No one else will be harmed. All the companions have passed away and entered paradise. Who has entered paradise yet? Who hasn't died yet? It's our friend here, trying to interfere in the matter. He has the power to change history. None of us can go back and change history and say what was right and what was wrong, what should have been done. But only his faith will be harmed when the stature of the great figures of the nation, whom God Almighty has witnessed, diminishes in his eyes. He exalted them with purity and faith and was pleased with them when his prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, testified that they were his companions in paradise. He is the one who will enter hell for delving into this matter because he lacked the necessary qualifications. This is in very brief terms a beautiful point. Any specialized topic, any complex topic, any topic that requires expertise and qualifications should be kept from those who are not specialized in it. It's like someone who doesn't handle surgical instruments to perform an operation if they are not qualified, or someone who doesn't handle construction tools to build, plan, and construct a bridge. That's the point. But the idea that when scholars said to refrain from discussing what transpired between the companions, this was their advice to the general public. As for the claim that there are things in our history that we conceal, things we keep secret, and things we disagree about that didn't happen, otherwise we would still be discussing this matter after 1440 or 1450 years. We have a wealth of historical material about what transpired between the companions. If the scholars had remained silent and prevented people from delving into it, we wouldn't be in this situation. We'll find history, you know, but it's a specialized matter. Those who specialize in it open the books and find before them a rich history and narratives full of detail. But this history and this wealth need the specialist so that when they read a certain narrative, they know it's weak, or when they read a certain word, they know how to put it in its correct context, or when they want to preach to people and benefit from the wisdom of what happened among the companions, the wisdom from which they can learn jurisprudence. All of this is the role of scholars. So, we haven't hidden anything from our history. No one has concealed anything. Nevertheless, I also like to point out things that might be overlooked by people. You know, let me tell you about a nice situation completely unrelated to our history. There's a very interesting book called The Death of the West, written by an American politician named Pete Buchanan. This man was even a candidate for the American presidency before, and he was the leader of a party, I think it was the Green Party in America in the early 90s. This man, regarding the book The Death of the West, what does he say? The West is currently suffering from a number of diseases, and these diseases will lead to its demise. What diseases are these? There's a chapter called Chapter 4 on history that says we in America have such immense freedom that it allows us to attack the symbols and founders of the United States. We say Columbus was a thief and a highwayman, Magellan was a criminal and did this and that, so-and-so committed genocide, so-and-so slaughtered Native Americans, and so on. All of this will contribute to the creation of a generation that doesn't respect American history or its founding heroes. thus weakening Americans' loyalty and sense of belonging to this American nation. Therefore, he advocates for falsifying history or preventing discussion of these great figures so that we don't end up with a generation that surrenders if the United States is invaded, because he believes that the United States was founded on massacres and that its symbols were immoral. So, who is this guy talking about? He's an American, and nobody institution in the world, no media outlet that dominates American history. This is academic freedom. Americans themselves are the ones discussing their history, and yet he fears that this freedom will lead to a weakening of people's trust in their symbols and their homeland. So, Professor Muhammad, this man, he wants to say that if you close your eyes to your history, or allow it to be distorted, attacked, or dared to be insulted, this will lead to your end, even if it is justified. That is the idea he is saying. He has no objection to history being falsified for American national interest. I want to tell you that Muslims have never taken this stance. Muslims have never taken this stance. Although, yes, every nation has a sensitivity towards its symbols. For example, in Turkey, there is a law to prevent any criticism of Ataturk. In Iran, you will find that Khomeini cannot be criticized. In Saudi Arabia, for example, you will find that Abdulaziz cannot be criticized. Every country has its own figures who represent its identity, and they are very sensitive to any criticism of them because they see it as leading to the collapse of the national narrative. I want to tell you that Muslims never did that. They never did that. Muslims forbade delving into the fitna, which is the fighting that occurred between the companions. Muslim scholars did forbid it for everyone. No, they forbade it not even for the sake of the companions, not out of fear for Islam, but out of fear for you, fear for your fate in the hereafter, that you would delve into a subject you don't know, that you don't have the necessary knowledge for. So, I want to tell you something here. Why did I give the example of your righteousness and others? I want to say that people who accept that laws are put in place to prevent any criticism of historical figures, and people who accept that national archives remain secret for 20, 30, or 50 years, people who accept this don't realize that they are accepting something, and you're criticizing Muslims because they're telling you please don't speak about this subject unless you've fulfilled the necessary requirements. Meaning, when you have the ability, you can't just go digging through archives when you don't have the capacity to understand archives, archive systems, or the basic rules. Yes, simply and very clearly, Sheikh Murad, when scholars spoke about refraining from discussing the disputes among the companions, they were preserving people's religion. Well, you, by God, are a man with passion, desire, and scholarly ability. Trust in God and prepare yourself for this matter. Go and study, read the chains of transmission, read the narrations, and trust in God. No one will ask you why. Okay, that's clear. So, this person who wants to go and do this, trust in God and take the plunge. I have a question for him, which is a question for specialists now. Okay, Professor Muhammad, we haven't hidden anything from history, nor do we want to conceal anything from people. The whole point is that only specialists should delve into this matter. Exactly, and the scholars have issued a recommendation to refrain from discussing this topic, even out of concern for your faith. Yes, my question is for this person who is going to study and prepare themselves so they can speak on this subject, whatever their field or background. My problem might be with specialists because sometimes when they give a lecture or stand as a preacher on the pulpit, etc., and want to cite something, they bring you small snippets, a small scene or a sentence, and this kind of incitement creates chaos in your mind. So, another idea is when you prepare for this topic and organize your information. I think it's extremely important how you convey the information. It might also be helpful in this specific topic to mention the abstract information, but you must also mention the lesson and the moral. Why are you discussing this topic? Not just to convey information or narrate the story, Some specialists, like Professor Muhammad, might fall into pitfalls because of their inability to communicate the information effectively. It's possible, it's true. After all, these specialists are human beings with different talents, and some of them he has the ability to simplify and make information accessible and to present it to you in a concise and clear way. Some doctors lack this ability. It's like when you go to a doctor, you'll find only repeating. You'll get this medicine, you'll get this scan, you'll get this test, and nothing more. He can't simplify the matter for you. Indeed, specialists may or may not possess this talent, but what I mean is that the scientific approach, the Islamic scientific school, hasn't prevented anyone from discussing any topic. We're in January 2025, 1,400 years from that date, and books are still being written on this topic, on the strife among the companions. Just 2 days ago, one of our researcher friends published a book on the strife among the companions. So I want to say, if the claim that Muslims don't like to talk about this topic were true, we wouldn't have any history, folks. No, we have a history that continues to unfold. From my own experience and research into the fitna civil strife, I can tell you that what has been left behind, or what can still be worked on, is no less than what has been produced throughout this entire period. We are still discovering manuscripts, we are still discovering narrations, and scholars are still emerging who connect evidence and narrations, pointing out what scholars have said in the field of hadith criticism that supports a narration, corroborates it, and provides other avenues for it. So nothing is hidden or concealed. It's all a matter of pure specialization. That's why I'm saying this. Only an unqualified Muslim will lose by delving into the issue of the fitna. But people like summaries, Professor Muhammad. If we wanted to summarize the answer to this question, what would we say? Scholars recommended refraining from discussing what transpired between the companions to preserve the religion. People who don't have the necessary skills and qualifications to delve into such a large, complex, and sensitive topic. And we haven't hidden anything. No, we haven't hidden anything. Yes, question number 37. Professor Muhammad, let me tell you something before I ask you question 37. No to the wolf, no to the wolf. Look, in Palestinian Arabic, no, look, you have to tell me less wolf, okay? You have to tell me less wolf, less wolf, less wolf. Yes, good. Look, in Palestinian Arabic, when we want to ask someone for something, we ask him for something difficult, so we say to him, you wolf, meaning, will you fulfill it or should I go back? So if he says less wolf, it means, okay, good, I'll give you what you want. You just say it and that's it. And if he says no to the wolf, it means I can't. Less wolf. Yes. Question 37. Professor Muhammad, me and the esteemed viewers want to ask you a question. Yes, I know, God willing. It's a question with letters A, B, C, D, and 6 branches, meaning, okay, they have no relation to some. But just figure it out yourself, meaning you have to answer me, God willing, because I felt that these questions couldn't be ignored. Okay, question 37 tells you we are now, of course, on the topic of the rightly guided caliphate. My brothers, and the question we asked to get into the topic of the fitna civil strife, meaning we started to delve into the topic of Uthman ibn Affan, the third rightly guided caliph. Question 37. How did the fitna begin, Professor Muhammad? And it occurs to all of us to ask, what was the reason for the rebellion against Uthman ibn Affan? This is a central issue. What were the 5 claims or the 5 lies that those who rebelled against Uthman made? I mean, those who rebelled, there must have been a reason that made them rebel. Also, it occurs to me that someone studying the fitna file might ask whether any of the Prophet's companions, may God bless him and grant him peace, participated in the killing of Uthman? This is another question that was raised. Of course, that was raised and discussed a lot, and you feel that people are like that. Some people just sit around. Their only job is to attack the symbols of this nation, to attack the companions, to attack the Sunnah, to attack the Holy Quran, and I am one of them, of course. It also occurs to anyone studying this issue to ask why didn't Muawiyah, the powerful governor in Syria, may God be pleased with him, move from Syria and save the situation, given that there was a strong army there. They tell you who wants Medina, our master Ali, may God be pleased with him, and the noble senior companions. Why didn't they defend our master Uthman and protect him from being killed? These are all questions that are intertwined and overlapping when you open the file on sedition. May God help you, and we are with you in prayer, God willing. Okay, brother, I will begin by saying what we mentioned in the last episode, that God Almighty and His Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, established for Muslims a period called the rightly guided caliphate so that Muslims could learn from it how to manage their affairs. And we said that one of the advantages of the rightly guided caliphate is the period of the rightly guided caliphate encompassed all stages of statehood. If the rightly guided caliphate were solely a period of strength and empowerment, and Muslims subsequently experienced weakness and defeat, they would lack a model to emulate. They wouldn't know how to deal with each other when disagreements arose. Therefore, the period of the rightly guided caliphate must include periods of weakness, discord, and fighting. This is because the Muslim community will continue to understand, for thousands of years until the Day of Judgment, how to govern in such matters. Abu Hanifa, may God be pleased with him, said that without Ali people would not have known how Muslims should conduct themselves. If there were no Ali, no one would know how Muslims should fight. What is the jurisprudence? Would we kill, enslave, and destroy each other? Or is it like fighting the disbelievers? That's a different matter. So, when do we fight? Does simply insulting someone or disagreeing with them start a fight? Or does fighting only begin after exhausting certain stages? All this jurisprudence happened because there was a period of strife. And this is a great blessing and a tremendous positive thing from God that it happened during the best of generations, so that we can study and continue. Yes, it happened during the best of generations, and the Prophet told us, adhere to my sunnah and the sunnah of the rightly guided caliphs after me, and hold fast to it. The Prophet told us that this was a period of legislation for Muslims in the realm of politics. Okay, that's number one. Number two, we Muslims are human beings. We Muslims are human beings, meaning that what happens in human history will happen in our nation. Therefore, we are not angels. But even when we examine this period of strife, we will find that even the fighting among Muslims was the most honorable and noble fighting, a fighting surrounded by ethics that were not found in any civil war that occurred between nations. Muslims had civil wars, just as all nations had civil wars. Let's look, sir, at the civil war that occurred among Muslims. Ali and Muawiyah, or between Ali and Talha, Zubair, and Ashar. How did these people act? And then, how did the rest of the nations act in the civil wars that occurred? I mean, my friends, no one can shake us, or know what I mean. What I want to say is, there were wars and fighting among the companions in our history. We are human, so all the problems of humanity happen to us, and we remain superior to them because of our morals. Now, let's talk about what happened, how the strife occurred, or what the causes of the strife were. Of course, the questions you asked open up the big topic for us. Let me present to people a simple map. Now, let's consider this strife to have three parts. A word strife itself linguistically has more than one meaning. Strife may be mentioned and mean a test, meaning it is enough for people to say, we believe, and they will not be tested. They are tested, meaning they are tried. It may also be used to refer to something bad to fighting. It may be used to refer to something bad to fighting. The word fitna refers to a situation where the truth is unclear, a confusing and embarrassing matter. All these terms fall under the umbrella of fitna. Therefore, I consider fitna to have three major stages. The first stage is when the word fitna means evil fighting, reprehensible fighting, something bad, something hateful, something detested. This is the section that is the rebellion against Uthman. A nation's stance on the rebellion against Uthman is clear. Uthman was a rightful caliph, and those who rebelled against him were either ignorant, transgressing, malicious, or criminal. This is the stance of all the companions with Uthman. There were no companions who were not with him. A entire Ali was on one side and Zubair, Talha, and Aisha were on the other. If fighting occurred, or Ali was on one side and Muawiyah was on the other, then the word fitna means a matter. The third section is ambiguous, suspicious, and perplexing. The truth is unknown. Its title is misunderstanding, or rather, everyone has their own conviction that they are right, or they have a valid argument that they are right. Everyone sees themselves as being on the right path and believes they are fighting to establish the truth which is pleasing to God and His Messenger. Yes, but they differed on what constitutes this truth. The third section is the Kharijites who rebelled against our Master Ali. This is also the issue of the nation. Our Master Ali was on the right path. In general, our Master Ali, along with the companions, was right. But how did we know he was right? We knew from prophetic texts. We couldn't understand them until after the strife occurred. Glory be to God. For example, the most famous example, I'll get to examples later, is that the rebellious group will kill Amr. This text couldn't be revealed until after Amr was killed. Yes, before Amr was killed, you wouldn't understand because Amr had participated in many battles, and he came out of it right. So even now, if you see our Master Amr with our Master Ali in the army, meaning if I were in Muawiyah's army and saw our Master Amr in Ali's army, I wouldn't understand that Amr was on the right path until he was actually killed. Then I would see that I was part of the rebellious faction. But before that, the possibility of Amr's survival was present and valid. So, a question will arise. Why didn't Muawiyah stop after killing Amr? We'll get to that later. But what I want to say is there are texts from which we understand that our Master Ali was right, but these texts cannot be understood until they actually happen. Okay, so now we have the fitna civil strife. This big scene has three parts: the part of the rebellion against Uthman, the right being with Uthman, the part of the Kharijites who rebelled against Ali, the right being with Ali, and the ambiguous part, which is Ali with the rest of the right ones. Ali was sometimes with Talha, Zubair, and Aisha, and sometimes with Muawiyah. This is an ambiguous situation, and even if we were talking about it until now, I could tell you the whole story and you wouldn't know. The truth of the matter means that if we said we did and have the hadiths stating that Ali was in the right, I could tell you the story and we would still be arguing about who was in the right. In fact, I would argue that if these authentic hadiths didn't exist, many people might have thought Muawiyah was in the right. This reflects a lack of understanding and limited intellect. Without the hadiths, it would seem as though Muawiyah was in the right. The issue is very, very ambiguous. So we have three sections. Let's take the first section, which is about criminals plotting against Uthman. How did the story begin? We said that Uthman assumed the caliphate in the year 24 AH. Umar was killed in Dhu al-Hijr of the year 23 AH. When Uthman assumed the caliphate, there were only a few days left until the year 24 AH. So, we said that Uthman sent a message, you know what that is, like the inaugural address. When someone assumes leadership, he gives a speech. In the past, it was true that the caliph would give a speech, the speech of allegiance or the speech of leadership. But the people who were not living in the city, we didn't have televisions back then. So he used to send books. Among the books sent was one by our master Uthman to his supporters. Our master Uthman warned that their generation was beginning to change. He said that the affairs of this nation were heading towards change and that this would happen after three things would appear in the nation. What would these things do to us? They would cause a change in the generation. The first thing is the accumulation of blessings. The accumulation of blessings means we will be rich, prosperous, and have luxury. This accumulation of blessings is a dangerous moment, and you know the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, in the hadith where he said, "By God, I do not fear poverty for you, but I fear that the world will be opened up to you, and you will compete for it as other nations competed for it, and it will destroy you." Poor, honestly, it's true. And when he became rich, money and wealth preoccupied him. That is why the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, sought refuge from forgetful poverty. And the overwhelming wealth is when you remain so poor that you can think of nothing but money because you no longer know how to eat, drink, or find shelter. So money and children distract you from remembering God. So our master Uthman and our master Al-Hasan al-Basri, who was one of the masters of the Tabi'in, said, "I lived during the time of Uthman and heard him give sermons. Not a day passed without him calling out to the Muslims, 'Come, I will give you money.' So they would go and take plenty. Then it would be said, 'Come to ghee and honey provisions,' meaning, 'O God.' So they would be given provisions and take plenty. Then it would be said, 'Come to clothing and garments.' So they would be given provisions and take plenty. He said, 'The enemy is fleeing, and wealth is abundant, and no believer on earth fears another believer.' This is the prosperity that our master Uthman enjoyed. What a world! Security beyond security. No believer on earth fears the enemy, and wealth is abundant, and the world is stable. So this is a social change. He says that your affairs are progressing towards that. This means that three things will become apparent: the integration of blessings and the coming of age of your children from among the captives when they grow up. Their fathers and mothers may have been Persian, Roman, or Coptic. When they grow up, their culture will no longer be authentically Arab or even authentically Islamic. They may have been influenced by foreign influences because they speak two languages. Their fathers are Arab, but their mothers are not. So, when these people become leaders, or young people, or influence events, we have a cultural shift. The reading of the Quran by Arabs and non-Arabs. This is the statement of Uthman is the third thing. The companions received the Quran in Arabic. They understood it just as we understand our everyday speech. They didn't need interpretation. When it was revealed to them, they knew when and where the verse was revealed. They understood the map of Islam and the map of the Quran. Now, when people enter into Islam, we have Bedouins who understand the Quran, but they don't know where the verses were revealed, so they mix up their order. They don't know the abrogating from the abrogated, the restricted from the unrestricted, or the general from the specific. This happened far from them. They see a book and misunderstand it. Then there are the non-Arabs who don't know the language or anything else. When their numbers increase, a scientific or cultural shift will begin. These are three things that started to emerge and affect the formation of society during the time of Uthman ibn Affan. There's another thing that also emerged, which some historians have noted, and which Al-Tabari mentions. Umar had a policy. You, the senior companions, didn't you choose me to be nominated for the caliphate? This matter is on my neck and yours together. None of you should leave the city. Whatever matter is presented to us, we will discuss it here. Therefore, Umar did not allow for the senior companions to leave Medina. Was a matter of interpretation, meaning that this issue is a responsibility you bear, just as you held Uthman responsible for it. No, I don't mean to insult people. Whoever wants to leave, let them leave. For jihad, for dawah invitation to Islam, or to settle down. It's a normal matter. Here, Al-Tabari mentions that some people in every society, there are opportunists who know how to infiltrate, attach themselves, and become close to important figures. This happened with the senior companions when they went to the cities. These people said to them, tomorrow they will assume power, meaning maybe tomorrow they will be the caliphs or the emirs, and they will have become known to us, or we will have become known to people through them. Yes, there is an element of opportunism. Therefore, we will see later that some people were close to some of the senior companions, those who like to take selfies with them. Yes, I'm sorry, I mean, they are still around today. Yes. So, I want to say that a social change occurred within the inner circle of the companions. Some of the senior companions. Okay, the third thing is that, oh, what happened? The abundance of wealth. Look now, as I told you, we are in the year 24. Conquests 20 years after the conquests, mind you, the Muslim nation was going to sweep across the world, east and west. Spoils of war came to them. Wealth increased. It's very rare for the nation to be defeated. In this case, war becomes like a picnic. Not only do the bearers of the message and the warriors go out to fight, but also those who covet the spoils, those who have and received as much from the Quran, the Sunnah, and proper upbringing as the first generation, which was fundamentally flawed, did. What was the purpose of spreading the message, conquering lands and spreading the religion? So now we have, in certain areas, centers, the Islamic armies, some people for whom worldly desires were present alongside the desires of the hereafter, or rather, present without the desires of the hereafter. When we reach this stage, what Ibn Khaldun called the advantage of tribalism over religious devotion occurs. Now, after Islam was number 1 and the tribe number 2 or 3 among the companions, now the group that wasn't raised with a sufficient Islamic upbringing, and the group that embraced Islam when Islam was victorious and wealth was plentiful, their tribal affiliation takes precedence over their religious affiliation. Ibn Khaldun calls this the advantage of tribalism over religious devotion. So, what does this mean? Sheikh, it will cause us something dangerous. Let me pause here and consider this scene. I'll go back a year and then come back to it again. Our master Umar, our master, during the time of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and during the time of our master Abu Bakr, wealth was scarce. The fundamental principle of the Islamic system is that you do what? That the wealth it comes to the prince or the treasury, meaning the prince and the treasury redistribute it. This is the original principle. The state didn't have an official treasury during the time of the Prophet and during the time of Abu Bakr. Even scholars differed on whether there was such a thing as a treasury or not. Was there such a thing as a public treasury for the state or not? Because all the money that came through it would go away. Abu Bakr's theory on distributing money was that everyone should receive salaries and stipends equally. Umar disagreed with him on this, saying, you should treat those who fought against the Messenger of God the same as those who fought alongside him. Both should receive the same. There shouldn't be any reward or compensation for past actions. Abu Bakr said that this money was a pension and that it was better to distribute it equally. Then, when Umar took over, he had a different viewpoint. He said that those who fought alongside the Messenger of God should not be treated the same as those who fought against him. Therefore, the money would be distributed. Umar had his own viewpoint. He said a man's worth, his contributions, his seniority in Islam, his family and his needs. So, What did our Master Umar do? He created a system of 4 elements. A man's standing in Islam means he receives more than someone older than someone newer. A man's worth, meaning his competence and talent, someone who contributes significantly, unlike someone who doesn't contribute at all. A man's family, meaning someone with many children, unlike someone with only 2, and a man's needs, meaning someone who is sick or poor. This is the system that our Master Umar established for distribution. So, what was our Master Umar's idea? His idea was that when we have people with a lot of money, those who were among the early Muslims during the time of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, this will make them leaders in society because of their status and their wealth. Their spending of money will be that of the pious and pure, as the verse says, by spending on the needy, by doing good deeds, by performing acts of charity. This creates role models for people, showing them how money should be used. If you distribute wealth, then you are socially elevating the pure, virtuous religious class. Their spending will reflect positively. Instead of you, look at the habits of the wealthy. Yes, when they're wealthy in society are the most generous, the most pious, and the most ascetic. This makes the general society accustomed to giving, accustomed to asceticism, accustomed to worship. The example before you is a very beautiful one. Our Master Uthman followed the example of our Master Umar in this manner. Now we have reached a stage, the scene I mentioned. Let's leave that aside, where the remaining senior companions, for example, like Talar and Abd al-Rahman ibn Auf, became wealthy. The tribes that came without an Islamic upbringing, where religious motivation outweighed tribal motivation, where tribalism took precedence over religious motivation, began to feel inferior to the Quraysh. Their calculations are now based on tribal affiliation. They began to feel that they were inferior to the Quraysh, that they received less money than the Quraysh, and that the Islamic system was rigged. Look, when you're rigged from a tribal perspective, you'll see that Islam belongs to the Quraysh now. Or someone who hasn't converted to Islam might see that the Islamic system favors the Arabs or the Quraysh within the Arab world. So, I want to tell you that someone who is dissatisfied with the Quraysh from a tribal perspective, or someone who is dissatisfied with Islam from a non-Muslim perspective, will agree that they want to change this situation. So, when the crisis first appeared, it actually appeared in a place called Kufr. Yes, we've come to the epicenter of history, the epicenter of the problems. Of course, let me clarify something for the viewers, Mr. Muhammad, so they don't lose interest. Right. What is Mr. Muhammad doing, guys? He's laying out the groundwork to tell us how the strife began. All Mr. Muhammad is doing is explaining the motives and reasons that the story of the fitna civil strife opens up a vast and complex world for us. It delves into the social, philosophical, logical, and behavioral dimensions of this issue. This is absolutely essential to begin studying this topic in order to understand human behavior. It's
هو طبعا انا بتكلم دلوقتي في الجذور البعيده او بيسموها الاسباب غير المباشره اللي هو ايه التغير الاجتماعي
origins and why these people objected. This story is very important. Yes, Professor Muhammad, may God bless you. This is an important clarification. Of course, I'm now talking about the distant roots, or what are called the indirect causes, which are the social and cultural changes and what happened to give rise to this topic. Now, let's turn to Kufr. We had some problems with Kufr. Firstly, Kufr, Basra, and Fustat are cities founded by the Arabs. They weren't cities that didn't exist before. They began as military centers, and then, while remaining as camps, the conquerors would march east and north to the Caucasus, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. The people of Basra controlled the southern and eastern parts of Asia, while the people of Kufr would head towards Tabaristan and the Caucasus. These are the regions their conquest means, of course, that the people of the Levant settled in Damascus, and that became their capital. The people of Fustat in Egypt oversaw the conquests of North Africa and Nubia, so the strife began. Of course, among these cities, Kufr was the city that most troubled our Master Umar ibn al-Khattab. This was during the time of our Master Umar. We are sitting here talking, okay, well, believe me, you reminded me of something I should have said. Our Master Umar, our Master Umar was a very imposing and very decisive figure. Our Master Uthman was not like that. Our Master Uthman was gentle with us, kind and compassionate to people. So, this is one of the reasons we can call it the psychological factor that was affected by the strife. For example, our Master Abdullah ibn Umar, when he was talking to the rebels against Uthman, then what did he say to them? He said to them, "By God, you have criticized Uthman for things that, if Umar had done them, none of you would have spoken." Of course, that whoever wants to talk to Umar, where is Uthman's own opinion when he was talking to them? Then he said, "But what you did to me, my dream is for you." Scholars talk about the rightly guided caliphate. It's true that the entire period was exemplary, but the time of the two sheikhs
إن يطيعوا أبا بكر وعمر يرشدوا إن يهتدوا بالذين من بعد يرشدوا. يعني في حديث خاصة بتقول إنه الفترة دي مميزة كمان على إيه؟ على فترة الصهرين.
Abu Bakr and Umar was different from the time of the two sheikhs. The two sheikhs were the pinnacle, and there are specific hadiths that say people should obey Abu Bakr and Umar, and that they should be guided by those who came after them. There are hadiths that say this period was also distinguished. What was it? The period of the two sheikhs, Abu Bakr and Umar, and the period of Uthman and Ali. Yes, that's right. So, from the time of Umar, Kufr was troublesome for him and rebelled against its governors. Who were these governors? One of them was Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, one of the 10 promised paradise. Umar included him in the 6 members of the Shura Council. He said, "When I die, he will be one of the candidates for the caliphate." Kufr was rebelling against Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, and without going into too much detail, the stories are well known. The reader or viewer can search for them. There was Sa'd, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, then al-Walid ibn Akbar, and then Sa'id ibn al-As. You're talking about people who were shrewd leaders and prominent figures, and some of them were even nominated by Umar for the caliphate. But the people of Kufr kept complaining to Umar about their governor. Umar is famous for the story where he said, "Who will excuse me from the people of Kufr? What am I to do with these people of Kufr? If I appoint a pious man over them, they weaken him," saying, "He's a weak man, too pious and religious to govern the city. And if I appoint a strong man over them, they rebel against him, saying, 'What is this wicked man you've brought us?' Nothing pleases them. Pleasing people is a sin. Glory be to God." At that time, Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah was present and said, "O Commander of the Faithful, the pious man's strength is for his own benefit, and his weakness is against you. As for the strong man, his strength is for your benefit, and his wickedness is against him." So, Umar, of course Mughira ibn Shu'bah was one of the 4 most astute Arabs, a truly brilliant mind. So, he was appointed governor of Kufr, but people complained about him and he was dismissed. Later, Umar ibn al-Khattab dismissed him. Now, this is what happened during Umar's time. Now, add to that the social and psychological developments I just described. Let's see how things would unfold during Uthman's time. It would be a different story, a much bigger problem. So, the beginning of the objections came from Kufr. The problems started in Kufr. What happened in Kufr was that one of Uthman's sons was in charge, Walid ibn Akbar ibn Abi Mayyad. He was accused of drinking alcohol, and we won't go into the details too much. The important point is that the accusation wasn't proven against him, but the talk about Walid increased. The talk became so widespread that some of the companions wanted to remove Walid from Kufr, not because the accusation was proven, but because of the excessive talk about him. Of course, this narration is found in Bukhari, What's in Bukhari is the accusation, not the validity of the accusation. They accused him, or they narrated that he prayed Fajr and said, "I'll add more for you," and so on. This is the narration itself. The accusation is there. I mean, it's narrated with a sound chain of transmission. But the accusation itself, was he actually drinking alcohol? No, it's not valid. It wasn't proven. So, our master Uthman decided in the end to punish Al-Walid with the prescribed punishment for drinking alcohol. He said, "And the burden of sin falls on the accuser." So, this is the beginning of the second time. For example, someone came, it seems he had recently converted to Islam and did know that magic was forbidden or that it was punishable by death, so he went to Kufr to put on a show, pretending to kill himself while he was still alive, and pretending to enter the belly of a snake. Anyway, one of the soldiers, a soldier from the Azdi tribe, went out to him and killed him, saying, "Do you practice magic while you are seeing?" This is a kind of usurpation of authority. Usurpation of authority means carrying out the punishment without the permission of the ruler. So, excuse me, Al-Walid, with the advice of Uthman, may God be pleased with him, a group of young men had a dispute, and Al-Lars arrived in Kufr. He realized that the senior companions, the great conquerors who were present in Kufr, were now deeply embedded in the conquered lands. Kufr itself no longer had the group, the people of precedence, seniority, and wisdom, and now had this new group that measured the matter from a tribal perspective and viewed the issue as if the Quraysh had begun to dominate the Arabs and enslave them, and so on. So our master Uthman ordered him to bring before him the people of precedence. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on the subject of Kufr. Let's just say that Kufr became one of the centers of. There was a group of people who wanted to revolt against Uthman. This was the beginning of it. This situation in Kufr and a smaller one in Egypt was similar. We had a man named Hakim ibn Jabir. This man, before he converted to Islam and joined the Muslims, was a highwayman. When Islam spread and the conquests began, he would go out with the army, but his old habit was still active. He would sneak away from the army, raid the property of the people of the book al-Dimr, and then rejoin the army. When people complained about him, Uthman ordered that this man should not go out on the conquests again. So, if you don't let someone like that go on the conquests, what is he supposed to do? You've cut off two paths for him, a lawful path, which is the spoils of war, and an unlawful path, which is plunder. He understood. Hakim ibn Jabir also began to become a center of power, attracting those who opposed him, whether they were his governor or Uthman's. May God be pleased with him. This situation could not have been, it would have exploded if it weren't for the emergence of a very dangerous figure named Abdullah ibn Sabr. Yes, look, of course. Firstly, Abdullah ibn Sabr is a real, established figure in history, because some historians, and even some Orientalists and some Shiites, reject his existence. But when you examine the narrations, you find that Abdullah ibn Sabr is a real figure. He exists in more than one source. Good, I was going to ask you about this topic, but we've answered it, guys. We're done. Close this chapter. Okay. So he is a real figure, yes, but the question that always comes up is, how did a Jew manage to turn the Islamic world upside down? He didn't turn it upside down or anything. Whenever there is a leader, that leader knows how to use the existing circumstances. So Abdullah ibn Sabr used the circumstances I've been talking about all morning. He wasn't able to turn the Islamic world upside down by his intelligence alone. Rather, he found a situation that he could manipulate. So Abdullah ibn Sabr is a Jewish figure. Some people like to compare him to the figure of Paul in Christianity. Paul was one of the most bitter enemies of Christ, peace be upon him. The moment Christ was crucified and his death ended, he would say, "Brother, today I had a vision of Christ. He came to me and commissioned me to deliver his message." He would then become the leader of Christianity, the one who made Christ a god. So, after the children of Israel had seen Christ as a prophet, this man planted the idea of Christ's divinity, that Christ is God, incarnate in Jesus, and that's why he was born without a father. This whole mess, this intellectual construct created by Paul, which led Christianity astray. Abdullah ibn Sarbar wanted to create something similar in Islam, but of course, Islam is something else entirely. He couldn't say that our Prophet Muhammad was God, so what did he do? He exaggerated the status of Ali ibn Abi Talib, may God be pleased with him. He said, how can someone die without Ali being the successor? Ali is the only one from whose lineage the Prophet descended, Hassan and Hussein. Of course, all the Prophet's descendants died during his lifetime, peace and blessings be upon him, except for Hassan and Hussein. These are the pure blood, the noble blood. It's about noble lineage. So how can someone named Abu Bakr, or someone named Omar, or someone named Uthman be given precedence over Ali? Is this idea the brainchild of Abdullah ibn Sarbar, or is it from ancient societies? It's very possible. All these places, we had hereditary succession. No one elected a king. People elected a king like Chosroes, Caesar, or Muqarqis. It was all hereditary. So, the people were accustomed to the prevailing idea that the closest relative in lineage and blood should inherit the throne from the deceased king. Abdullah ibn Sarbar emphasized this point, saying that every prophet has a successor, and just as Muhammad is the seal of the prophets, Ali is the seal of the successors. Therefore, the turning point in the deviation was the usurpation of the caliphate from Ali ibn Abi Talib. Of course, when you say this during the time of Uthman ibn Affan, what is the practical application of it? You rebel against Uthman. You can't bring back Abu Bakr and Omar from history now, but the practical application is when you exaggerate. Regarding Ali ibn Abi Talib, you say that Uthman is now assuming power illegitimately and has begun relying on authentic hadiths praising Ali ibn Abi Talib, and then inventing hadiths of his own and adding them to praise Ali ibn Abi Talib, so that the conclusion becomes that Ali ibn Abi Talib is the most deserving of the caliphate, and that this current situation must be changed due to the weakness of people's souls. You feel it makes sense? I mean, yes, that's right. Why isn't it hereditary? I mean, it's true, but I was asking you, Professor Muhammad, what did Abdullah ibn Sarbar want? I mean, why did he appear in all this? What injustice did he suffer? For example, the people of Kufr, yes, we understand, misunderstood the decisions. What was this man's problem? What was this man? Of course, everything I'm saying now and everything I will say is based solely on authentic narrations. Yes, I mean, I won't mention the weak narrations. The certain part is that this was a Jewish man who feigned Islam and wanted to corrupt Islam with these ideas, just as Paul the Jew did. So, did injustices befall him or not? It is not proven to us through authentic narrations the story of the injustices that befell him, but his problem was with Islam. Yes, his problem was with Islam, and he was, of course, a Jew originally from Yemen. He went to Basra, he went to Kufr, he went to Syria, and he also went to Egypt. But his output in these regions was weak. In Egypt, he nurtured and cultivated his ideas. Of course, in Syria, Muawiyah was extremely vigilant. In Basra and Kufr, he did not succeed, but he realized the existence of these corrupt atmospheres, or the existence of these groups who were angry at Uthman's rule, or who were angry at Uthman, or who were angry at Islam. The same thing happened in Basra. So, his decision, or rather, the most important thing he did in Egypt, is that it is proven through authentic narrations that Abdullah ibn Sarbar had an organization, and that this organization was able to forge books and letters sent from Uthman, letters sent from Ali, and letters sent from Ashur. This appears, for example, you find what? You suddenly find a letter that appears. We will discuss it, God willing. But Uthman says it is one of two things: you bring two witnesses to testify that I wrote this, or I will swear to you by God that I did not write it, dictate it, or prove it. Now, there's a forged letter, supposedly, from Uthman, bearing the inscription of Uthman's ring. When they asked Ashur, so, this is what they did to you. You were also inciting against Uthman. She replied, by him in whom the believers believe and the disbelievers disbelieve. I didn't write them a single word, not even a single letter, until I sat in this position. So, Ashur was also falsely attributed with a forgery. They sometimes delegated authority to Ali, and Ali was with Uthman. They asked him, why did you write to us, inviting us? He replied, by God, I didn't write anything to you. So, you see in authentic narrations that letters were forged. This indicates an organized effort, not a coincidence. So, now we have a situation. Sheikh Abu al-Harith, a situation present in Egypt, Basra, and Kufa. This situation involves animosity towards Islam, or animosity towards Uthman, or animosity towards the Quraysh. This situation certainly interacted with natural matters, natural differences, and natural mistakes that occur from rulers or from Uthman, even though we said Uthman was infallible. Find, for instance, our master Abu Dihar was in Syria with Muawiyah. Our master Abu Dihar was a great companion. Our master Muawiyah was a great companion. Our master Abu Dihar had an opinion on money, and, of course, you know what kind of man Abu Dihar was: an enthusiastic and sincere preacher. This man, as soon as he heard about the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, a long time ago, went from the tribe of Gifar and undertook a perilous journey to meet the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. When he met the Prophet, he believed and returned and declared his Islam before the disbelievers of Quraysh. Look at his enthusiasm and sincerity. They beat him and almost killed him until one of their leaders, perhaps Al-As ibn Wa'il, I forget the name of the one who rescued him. He said to them, you are cutting off your trade route. Gifar is located on the trade route. If you kill one of Gifar, your trade will be lost. And half of the tribe of Gifar converted to Islam at his hands before the Prophet migrated to Medina. So you're talking about a first-rate preacher, a truly great and enthusiastic man. So, Abu Dihar, when he was in Syria and saw a great deal of wealth, had an opinion about it that most of the companions didn't share. Abu Dihar's opinion was based on the verse in the Quran, and those who hoard gold and silver and do not spend it in the way of Allah. He believed that anything beyond a person's daily needs should be given in charity. If it isn't given in charity, then that's the hoarding of wealth mentioned in the verse. Now, imagine having a preacher like Abu Dihar, with his capabilities, his enthusiasm, and his history. Imagine what might happen. Muawiyah sent word to Uthman, saying, please take Abu Dihar with you. If this man stays in Syria, the government won't be stable. So, Uthman summoned him. Yes, may God be pleased with him and with everyone else. Yes, Uthman summoned him and spoke to him. Abu Dihar understood from the conversation that Uthman was summoning him because of this potential security risk. So he said to him, you frighten me? By God, if you ordered me to, I'm clinging to the rope of her saddle, meaning, if you told me, it's impossible for Abu Dihar to even think of withdrawing his allegiance. Anyway, when he returned to Medina, Abu Dihar was surprised by something. He was surprised to find that the city's buildings had expanded until they reached Mount Salar on the city's borders. He had a commandment from the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, who said, if the construction reaches Mount Salar, then leave it. Don't stay in Medina. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, seems to have known, or perhaps he certainly knew, the nature of Abu Dihar's personality, that he was an enthusiastic man, and that he wasn't suited to politics but was suited to preaching. That's why he told him, "O Abu Dihar, I advise you not to be in charge of two things. You shouldn't be a guardian over two people, nor over the wealth of an orphan, nor should you be a sponsor of an orphan." He also advised him that if the construction reached Mount Salar, he should leave Medina. This atmosphere wasn't it wasn't suitable for Abu Dihar's personality. So when he returned, the builder saw the news and said to him, "I'm just asking permission to leave the city. This was the Prophet's commandment to me." And indeed, he left for a city called Al-Rab. Yes, that's right. So, I want to tell you that there are natural circumstances that can occur within these circumstances, interacting with and being built upon them. And whoever made a mistake here, a disagreement occurred. Here, Uthman himself made a mistake. Very ordinary matters, not the kind of things that cause a crisis. But here, what happened was that this organization began. This organization started sending messages to the provinces. Each group would tell you about the injustice they were experiencing in their province. If you were sitting in Kufr, you would find messages coming to you saying, "The people in Egypt are in a difficult situation. The governor is unjust. The people in Syria are being treated this way by the governor." So the people of each city would see that they were well and that injustices were widespread in the other provinces. It was a meat-eater campaign, a meat-eater war, and these messages would reach Medina. So the people of Medina would see that they were well because they were under Uthman's protection, while injustices were widespread in the provinces. Even those who had a fear made our master Uthman do two things. He sent a special envoy to the provinces to go and investigate, meaning he sent Uzarmar ibn Zayd, Amr ibn Yasir, and Muhammad ibn Maslarmar to see the conditions in the provinces. And he sent to the people of the provinces, "Whoever has a complaint or grievance, even against the governor, let him present it to the Hajj." The Hajj was like an annual conference, meaning like what? The annual conference of grievances, where everyone who had a complaint and wanted to take it to the caliph would go to the Hajj and find the caliph there, and he would go and complain to him about whatever the governor in his place had done. Then our master Uthman announced, meaning he was urging people who had a complaint to come to the Hajj. He would attend the Hajj and the governors would attend as well. Then the governors would return, and the emissaries sent by our master Uthman would return, saying, "We saw no evil," and he himself would go during the Hajj season and still not find any complaints. But things were going on in this way, secretly, or without going into too much detail, so as not to prolong the discussion. Yes, how much longer do we have before I get into it with you? Look, I don't want to shock you. I'll tell you, the episode is over, and the viewer, of course, is looking at me out of the corner of his eye saying, "No, where are you going? Stop right there. Don't be reckless." Well, we, of course, Professor Muhammad, are answering the question of how the sedition began in order to reach the moment of rebellion against our master Uthman. So, you, our master, have explained it to us, and you have clarified it for us, and you have made us understand that there were motives and reasons, and there were signs that appeared in Kufr and in the Levant, through Abu Dihar, and in Basra and in Egypt and Abdullah ibn Sarbar. This is the center of dissemination of the fitna. Now, how much of the episode is left? Let's pause at the question of how the fitna began and reach the moment of the uprising. We'll leave the topic at that point. Okay, so how did it begin? It began when a group of people from Kufr, when the complaints against them increased, our master Uthman ibn Affan exiled them to Syria. They went to Syria, and our master Muawiyah spoke to them, and they lived with him for a while and traded with him. But our master Uthman, our master Muawiyah, with his astute political mind, said, "These people pose no danger if they are not accompanied by others. This group from Kufr, what kind of group? People who are just stirring things up. What does that mean? It means if no one is planning for them, or if there are no other extensions behind them, then these people pose no danger. So they chose to leave. He said, the problem is if you want to bring them back to Kufr, then bring them back. They then chose to go to the Jazira region, which was under the rule of Abd al-Rahman ibn Khalid ibn al-Walid. Here at this point, they went and stayed with Abd al-Rahman ibn Khalid ibn al-Walid. But at this point, this is where the organizational work began. We're talking about something that happened called the Day of the Dose. This day is mentioned in Sahih Muslim. It's clear that one of the people went to the mosque intending to complain and revolt against Uthman's governor, Said ibn al-As. Al-Kakar ibn Amr al-Tamimi stopped him and said, if you have a complaint, go take it to Uthman. Said ibn al-As, who was Uthman's governor of Kufr at that time, had already gone to Medina. When he returned, correspondence had taken place between the group in Kufr and the group who had been exiled. They had pledged to stage a sit-in outside Kufr and prevent Said ibn al-As from entering or returning to it. They spread rumors that Uthman had ordered this demonstration or sit-in. When Said ibn al-As first arrived in Kufr, he found them divided. He asked, what do you want? They replied, we don't want you anymore as governor. We hate your governorship and will take your case to Uthman. So he didn't fight them and returned to Uthman. May God be pleased with him. Uthman asked, what do they want? They showed that they wanted a replacement, meaning they wanted to replace one governor with another. He asked, who do they want? They replied, they want Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. He said, we have already appointed Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. Ash'ari went and renewed the pledge of allegiance to Uthman ibn Affan from them and the people of Kufr. But look at the terminology they showed. It means they were aware of this. Yes, Said ibn al-As was one of the wise men of the Arabs and one of the most eloquent. He wasn't an easy governor, so he said, show him. Okay, on the day of the gathering, you could say that it was the first statement or the first action in the rebellion against our master Uthman. May God be pleased with him. So we can stop here and come to the verse, God willing, next time. And so we began to enter into a real movement called the uprising against our master Uthman. He will say at the end that a group will come to Medina and besiege the caliph's house. This is what we will talk about, God willing, in the next episode. Look, what I was afraid of is happening. We can finish the answer in one episode. The fitna civil strife is of course. We need to give it time so that things are understood properly. If we stop at question 37 and don't complete it, this is part of the 100 questions in history series. We are still on the topic of the rightly guided caliphate, specifically the fourth topic. God willing, we will complete the answer to this question in the next episode. Thank you very much, Professor Muhammad. Welcome, my dear brothers. Thank you very much. Don't forget to spread this good news everywhere. Until we meet again to watch more programs about Islamic history and to learn about its events, victories, defeats, leaders, scholars, events, secrets, governance, politics, wars, and battles. All you have to do is follow our history channel on YouTube, Our History from the Farthest